Well, thank you all again for being here. Can everybody see my screen okay? Perfect. Awesome. So we are so excited. My name is Rachel. I'm with St. Louis University. I do have a few of my wonderful colleagues at other universities who are here to help me present on finding your fit. So I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves real quick. We'll start with Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael Decker, and thank y'all so much, first off, for sitting in our presentation today. I'm actually based in San Diego, so I recruit all of our students from out west to go to school at Loyola University, Maryland on the East Coast.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Ed Devine from Xavier University. We are based in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I actually am based in Oahu, the 50th state. And I do get to work with and travel frequently in California and look forward to meeting with you, but excited to be here with Prospect and Ms. Bencomo. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. And we are going to have another admissions counselor join us probably in the middle of our presentation. Her name is Emily Pacheco. She's from Loyola University, Chicago. So she'll pop in as soon as she can, especially if you have any questions for her. But again, my name is Rachel. I'm with St. Louis University Office of Admission. I'm also based in San Diego, like Mr. Michael Decker. So excited to be here with you and kind of talk about this idea of what it means to find your fit. And we talk a lot about this as we go through the application process. You know, what does that mean? So we really want to help narrow down your college search and discover the factors that mean the most to you, because the factors that you might be looking for in a college may not be what your best friend is looking for in a college. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about moving forward with finding your fit. And then if you have any questions during our presentation, feel free to utilize the chat feature. We will have time at the end to answer questions too. So kind of asking ourselves, you know, what does finding your fit mean? So finding your fit, you know, we're really looking at the factors in colleges and universities that mean the most to you. So understand that this is your process, not anybody else's. You're the one who's going to college. And this is all about what you are looking for and what you want. Now, it is a little hard to narrow down the options because there's over 3,000 accredited colleges and universities in the United States. So hopefully today we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to narrow it down from 3,000 because that's just a little bit overwhelming. So we'll look into a variety of different factors, namely the ones that you see here on your screen. So finding your fit. The first option that we're going to look at is size. Does size matter to you as far as, do you want to be at a large institution? Do you want to be at a smaller institution or maybe somewhere in the middle? Location, do you want to be close to home? Do you want to be far away? Majors and programs, of what do you want to major in? Do you know what you want to major in? Are you a little bit more undecided, or you have a lot of things that interest you? So majors and programs, definitely. Acceptance rates. Understanding college acceptance rates, you know, the selectivity of certain colleges. Does it take a higher GPA? Does it take extra application items in order to be considered for certain universities as opposed to others? That factors into your fit as well. We'll touch a little bit on cost and financial aid. We're not going too much in depth because we know that you have another session all about financial aid. So we don't want to steal their thunder. That's coming up, I think, for you tomorrow. And then understanding the it just feels right moment. Every student kind of has that feeling when they find their university, for the most part, of, yeah, this is just feels like the right place that I need to be. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So let's start with size first and foremost. Understanding the differences between a smaller university and a larger university. So considerations, your high school size is a good kind of size to really start thinking about. You know, do you feel that your high school is really large? Do you feel that it's too small for you? Or do you feel like it's just right as far as how many students are in your classes every day? How many students are in your senior class? And how many students total are in your high school? So think about that. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like it's too small or too big? Another good question, do you like big cities or do you like smaller towns? Does the idea of a place like New York City sound like a place that you want to study for 4 years and really live and thrive in? Or does that sound overwhelming and maybe you need to focus on maybe a smaller city or smaller town or a college town even that has the college population as the majority of the population in that town. What student services do they offer based on their location? The resources that are available at each institution can vary based on size and location. So understanding that if you're at a bigger university, you might be more of just a number, and there might not be as many personalized resources available to you specifically. But maybe at a smaller institution, there are going to be much more personalized resources. Clubs and organizations. Do you want a club to be, 20 members and you know every single member in that club? Or do you want it to be hundreds of members where you get to meet new people every single time you go to that club or organization? Distance between classes. This is something a lot of students don't necessarily think about until they are touring a college campus. Are you okay walking 20 minutes from one class to the next? That usually happens at some larger institutions to where, one classroom isn't going to necessarily be a 5-minute walk away. It's going to be 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Are you comfortable bringing a bike on campus, bringing a scooter or a skateboard or a longboard? Or are you the type of person who's like, you know what, I only want a 5-minute walk max. I don't want to spend too much time walking. Then maybe a smaller, kind of more condensed university is going to be a better option. And then, of course, style. As you start looking into colleges and looking at their aesthetics and kind of their outlay of buildings on campus, does one specific type of campus intrigue you more than another? For example, does a much more modern, larger campus intrigue you? Or maybe a more smaller, historically rooted, a lot of old buildings kind of pique your fancy too. So these are all things to kind of ask yourself and consider when it comes to the actual college size. Another big factor is location. Where do you want to be? College is a college, but that college is always located in a town or a city. So, think about some places that maybe might be cool to attend college. I understand the majority of you just came from a presentation called Why Go Out of State? You got to ask yourself, do I want to go out of state? Would I rather stay in California? If I stay in California, do I want to stay close to home, or do I want to go somewhere where I could technically fly to if I wanted to, or drive to? So always good questions of, what am I most comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? Am I okay with looking at cities or colleges in cities that maybe I've never been to before? So all good questions. City or urban, or I should say rural or urban. Would you rather be amongst a lot of big buildings in a city? Would you rather be among a lot of greenery and open space when you're in college? More traditional versus a little bit more technology focused for locations as well. And then would you prefer living on campus or off campus type of a situation? So a lot of universities will have on-campus options. Some won't, where it'll kind of make you live off campus. So these are all good questions too. But I think the big question, especially for early on in the process that you are now, having it be August, is just thinking about places that sound good to you. Do you have family in certain places that you like to visit? Or is there just this one location that you're like, I've always wanted to visit Chicago, or I've always wanted to visit Baltimore or New York, or I don't know, Waco, Texas, just to see the options that you have out there. So be open to a lot of locations is kind of our best tip, but also ask yourself what you're going to be the most comfortable with. So a couple other questions to ask. We already went over a lot of these, but especially thinking about learning. I think we're echoing a little bit. If you don't mind just muting yourself if you can. Do I want to walk around a university where I recognize everybody and I get to know everybody really well, or do I want to be kind of hidden amongst the crowds? This goes back to the question of size. It's a good question to ask yourself. Would I rather be among 22,000 of my closest friends or 3,000 to 4,000 of my closest friends? Another good question I think a lot of students don't ask themselves right away is how well you learn in certain settings. So do you learn best in a larger lecture setting where there's 200 people You don't really get the chance to ask a lot of questions, but there's a presentation, there's a professor, and then if you have questions, you can email the professor later. Or are you the type of learner who prefers that smaller discussion-based learning? And then ask yourself too, where's your comfort level? Does the idea of attending a college in a big city excite you? Does it frighten you? Or how do you feel about living in more of a rural, quiet setting as opposed to kind of a loud, exciting city? So all good questions to ask. And we're really only kind of peeking the very beginning of factors to consider when it comes to finding your fit. And we'll go ahead and move on to some of our other options with Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Great tips. I think thinking about size and location, many times students don't consider that. And so think about having fun with this process. You are coming to live on our campuses in our communities for 4 years, and you want to have fun with that location and thinking about size. There's no right or wrong answer of what size school that you attend. But that will be something personal. And I think as Mrs. Bencomo said in the beginning, who you are now is going to change. And come April, the idea of this new adventure, this collegiate adventure, may look and feel a little bit different. So some of the questions that you ask now will help you to land in April at that choice and making that choice. And expect to be surprised. Sometimes you're really surprised in April when you make that final selection. But just to cast the net wide, as Rachel said, there's a lot of schools out there, depending on how you slice it, close to 3,000 universities that you can consider. And so we like to think about casting the net wide. At this point, you will have to funnel that down to the 8 or so applications that you do submit. But while you're in the research phase, understanding in California, you've got a great state system, without question, the strongest of any of the states. So you've got the 9 UC campuses, provide awesome opportunities. Their selectivity has gone up dramatically. And when I started out and when I did my college search, the UCs would not have been this hard to get into. So they're popular now based on the number of the students that apply. But that selectivity has made the UCs sometimes tougher to get into. A great 23-member state system that provides a lot of opportunities. So really take a deep dive into those. A very strong community college system in California that provides a great start for many of the students, and all of our colleges on tonight are very adept at working with transfer students. There's some private schools in California, but not a ton. When we look at and add up all those schools, there's a lot more throughout the country. So if we do one more click, just some ideas on really expanding that list. There are faith-based schools. We are part of the Jesuit network. There's 27 schools there. The Ivy League is an athletic conference, but some schools that you're going to recognize there. They're part of that group that drives a lot of the conversation about selectivity. And we will reflect on that. It is part of the admissions process. I went to a NESCAC school. They're very small liberal arts schools. So when Rachel talked about size, this is about 44 colleges and universities throughout the Northeast that tend to be in that 2,500 or smaller category. That might be a great place for a student athlete, for example, or for students that really want to get involved and stay involved like they did in high school across many different extracurricular activities. We could click through the whole list, Rachel, and just kind of bring them all up. Just one I love to talk about, colleges that change lives, a great host of schools, many in the Midwest and different parts of the country you might not look at. But these are small schools that really have dramatic impact on a student's life. So throughout this, really thinking about the experience that you're going to have is way more important than the ranking of the school or anything of that nature. So the historically Black colleges and universities provide a great list of schools to consider. You may be excited by athletic conferences. We at Xavier and the Big East, some people are drawn towards the SEC, the big football powerhouse conferences. So having fun with the list, expanding that list really will help create options. And if you find schools that you love, think about schools in different parts of the country that may have similar attributes. Size being one of them, your major, and may have similar opportunities as far as study abroad and research, and really think about expanding your list and finding some new schools as you start out in this process. If we do the next click, Rachel, we're going to talk a little bit about how this works. You're here to learn about the colleges, track that information. You don't need to know exactly what's the most important to you right now, but really this search starts with, in our next click, finding out who you are. and thinking about the things that you want to do. Who are you bringing to the colleges and universities? This is knowing yourself academically, knowing what your testing might be. You're going to have questions this year that we didn't ask before. You're probably going to take your tests, but then decide later if you're going to submit them, and you may submit them to some schools and not to others. But again, Rachel touched on some of this. When the size of the college or university comes into play, think about who you are within your high school, how active you are. If you like that collaborative work, you like to work in groups. There's not a place that you can or cannot do that, but it may help inform the size of the institution that you choose. So that personal evaluation is critical. And click through the rest of those and talk about major. A lot of students will find things that they really want to study. Others are undecided. There are probably a lot of colleges that will help land you as an undecided major. At Xavier, we would call you exploratory. At a school I worked at before, they would call you we would call everybody deciding majors. But really spending time thinking about what you do outside the classroom, your hobbies, your interests, what you're going to want to do on a Saturday or Sunday if you're on campus and you don't have class and you've got free time. Really think about that. Think about different locations throughout the country as a great backdrop to your education. We will tell you that your education will take place in the classroom, but much of the education will take place beyond that. And the quote there I love from a sophomore that I worked with on campus, asking her to reflect on her college search. She said the most important thing was just amass a bucket list of things that you want to do in college, and then find places that offer those opportunities and go do it. The where, the name of the school, not really as important as you finding out what you want to do through this process. Selectivity, Rachel, we can click ahead a little bit. Getting into school, Rachel talked about location and size. One of the other top criteria are finding that you get accepted, right? So schools can be selective, and I'm just going to point out a few things here. The most selective schools drive a lot of the hysteria around college admissions. There are schools admitting 4% of the applicant pool. The UCs are down at that 18 and 20%. That used to be 20 years ago what the Ivy League schools accepted. So the competitiveness has gone up. There aren't necessarily more high school students, but they are applying to more schools. So selectivity has kind of really been redefined. Most selective schools, again, might admit less than 9%, but understand that not everybody they admit enrolls. So that the second number you see there, that 79% in this example, is the yield rate, the number that we admit that choose us. So not everybody admitted to Stanford or Yale or Princeton will choose to attend because they're doing robust, solid college searches. They'll find other opportunities. Highly selective schools might admit somewhere in that 20 to 30%, and you'll see a sharp drop in the number that choose them, that yield rate. So one of the lessons to think about here is helping schools understand that you're committed to them, do your research, and show that you'll enroll, and that will have impact, what we call demonstrated interest, will have impacts on your admission decision as you move down the scale of selectivity. The most selective schools will not consider demonstrated interest, but you still want to do that research. And one more click, Rachel, we'll take a look at kind of the selectivity of selective and moderately selective schools. These schools may accept 50 to 60%. The national average of admit in colleges and universities is just over 70%. So there are opportunities here. But when selectivity comes into play, again, note those yield rates really help schools understand that you find fit and that if admitted, there's a strong chance that you will enroll. That's part of your job through the admission process, and that will give us the confidence to give you that nod as we move through this. So selectivity, it's changed. Know where you fall in the academic band and understand it's okay to get denied. We're not trying to do that, but if you do get denied from schools, it's not necessarily because your ability to succeed. It's more that institution, their application numbers, and things that they make decisions on beyond the academics. So the things we consider, your job as you go through this and look for your college search, your academics, we will evaluate you based on your academic qualities. And you can see here all the things that go into academics. Curriculum and GPA are probably the two most prominent, especially with the big push for test optional. But what you have control over, the personal qualities, note everything in your activities resume that you do outside. we ask questions all the time, like what impact will you make on campus? Your teachers, your counselors will help tell this story. Your essay, great opportunity to introduce us to who you are. Again, these are things that you have control over. The writing, the demonstrated interest, really let us know that you're out there and what you're going to bring to the campus beyond the academics. And if we go to the next click, just a real quick way that you're going to assemble a list of schools. You will apply to schools that are reach, target, and likely. So it's not a bad thing to put schools into your list that might be an academic stretch. Maybe you feel that you've got some great outside attributes that give you a strong chance at a school. You might be an alum, you might play a sport, you might have a story, but those reach schools are, again, schools that are just slightly beyond your academics, their average GPA and testing. The target schools, you fall right in that middle ground. You're right there in their mid 50%. So if their GPA average is a 3.5 and you have a 3.6, you might consider that in that target range. And the likely schools are schools that you really exceed or have stronger academic numbers than they present. So the reach, target, likely is a good plan to follow. You can look at that and map that out against your academics. Reach schools, again, they're going to be some of the ones that are tough on you, but that's okay. The target and likely schools, great opportunity for admission, probably some great opportunity for financial aid and scholarship, especially if you look at likely schools where you're going to be strong in the academic pool. So one more click and we'll just say, just be prepared for all these things to be considered as you launch into this. Your job is to put that application together, define your bucket list, the what you want to do, be prepared to present this stuff in the application. Importantly, like Mrs. Bencomo said, all this applying should help teach you things about yourself, things about what you like, things about what you want to do. The demonstrated interest or the leaning into us, the learning about us, the coming to the high school visits, the research that you do will help build capacity to that point in April when you make this final decision. So the application process is not that mysterious. This is the stuff you have to work with. Put the best application you can together, follow that reach, target, likely grouping of schools, and you're on your way to getting the application part done. We're going to talk to Michael now, who's going to talk a little bit more about an in-depth look at schools, opportunities to connect with us, visit with us, a really important part of finding that home. Michael?
Thank you so much, Ed. So I think the first thing that people will tell you all the time as you're doing your search, or when you talk to kids on a college campus and you're like, how did you pick? And you'll hear this saying all the time that says, it just felt right, or it just feels right when you go on campus. I'll be honest, when I visited my campus, I didn't feel this magic fairy dust that came down. It wasn't like that for me. But I want you to think of it like a shoe store that you go into, maybe DSW, and you're looking for a pair of shoes. There's all different shoes in there. But as you look around that shoe store, you'll start to realize things, kind of how Ed talked about the bucket list that you want to create. Maybe you want a shoe that's a running shoe, that looks cool, that's comfortable, all those things. Sometimes you put that shoe on and it fits perfect. I'll be honest, I've never slipped on a pair of shoes that have felt perfect right away. I've had to walk around the store. I've had to retie them or relace them sometimes. That's what you might have to do during your visit. You know, we're going to send you some slick brochures, or you might visit with us and say, yes, I enjoyed meeting with Rachel. That sounds like the perfect school to me. But then how do you really start to, one, interact or get to those types of visits so you can see if that feels right? And then two is going to be, once you're there, getting in and doing deeper dives and peeling those layers back. So there's a lot of different ways to do your visiting. Next slide, please. And the first thing I would say, and the easiest way, is social media. You know, we all have Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter. Some of us even have TikToks. A lot of those, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit older. I don't have all of those. I don't know how to run those. So my student workers are running those. So you're getting true snapshots of what our campus looks like. The other great thing about those social media accounts is it's free. You don't have to do anything. Just type our names in, log on, and start following us. There's some other ways, though, that you can do visits that we really like. Faculty interactions. These are, some will be mock classes where you can go and sit in on a class online virtually. Some will actually be in person. Some schools are actually doing in-person visits like that too. Some faculty, we do Zoom presentations where the faculty says, hey, if you want to learn about engineering, come to engineering and learn about that through an engineering Zoom. And then there's all different types of interviews. I think it's important when you see interviews or when a school asks about interviews, one of the keys about those interviews is making sure you know the type of interview you're doing. Are you doing an informational interview where you're going to sit down with me at Starbucks somewhere in and then in the neighborhood of where your school is, and we're just going to talk about Loyola, Maryland? Or is it going to be for admissions? Are you going to have to set up, are you going to have to ask a series of questions? Or maybe it's for scholarship or the honors program that you're interviewing for. Or special programs could also be if you're a music major. I used to work with a school that had music production. They had to do an interview also and not just an audition. So lots of opportunities for doing that. Another way to find your fit or to see if you're going to like it is talking to current students. I get paid to tell you how great it is. But I think when you really start looking and saying, okay, I want to talk to a student, getting on those panels or having a student tour guide, they're going to tell you what it's really like, or you'll be able to get to feel the vibe and say, okay, I really think I could go to school here. If there's no student panel or you're not interacting with the student, I always share with students, if whatever you're passionate about, that's where you need to go. So if you really want to make sure the food in the cafeteria is delicious, go in the cafeteria, taste that mac and cheese, and ask one of the students in there, hey, do you like this cafeteria? Is it always this good? You know, where else do you eat on campus? Those types of things. And then special events. We'll have open houses, preview days, scholarship days, special programs like alumni panels. Some of them will be Zoom and some of them are hosted virtually, which is really nice too. So there's not one way to start getting this information or to try on that shoe or trying on if that school fits. There's a lot of different ways. I'm very outgoing, if you can't tell by my presentation style, but I'm right up there. I want to do a tour. I want to be in the middle of an open house. Some students are a little bit more reserved. So they're going to start looking by social media and those types of things. Next slide, please. I know some parents will ask me, well, Michael, when's the perfect time to visit? Of course, you can visit anytime. If you're going on a family road trip right now and you want to stop, if you're going to the Grand Canyon and you're stopping at ASU for a tour, stop at ASU for a tour. But don't fly across the United States just to look at a school. Cluster them. So if you're flying across the United States, look at all those East Coast schools on one trip, you know, or maybe when you're going across, you stop at SLU, you know, there's a layover, do something like that. So lots of opportunities to get to know us virtually than having to go physically and spend all that money on a campus trip and then say, I don't like it. Next slide, please. So I think the great thing about our virtual visits is we are offering more virtually than we have ever done before. Even today, you're sitting here listening to 4 admissions counselors. Emily did join us, so you'll hear from her a little bit later. But she and all of us are experts on what we know, and we'll be happy to do other type of virtual events, either interviews or possibly just presentations on our colleges or universities, or specific things like engineering, music, nursing, those type of opportunities too. Current campuses, they're opening back up. My campus still has portable classrooms all over our campus. We don't have study abroad right now because of COVID. It's not the campus you're going to experience when you're on our campus in a year, but you're going to start to get that feel from virtual presentations. And like I said, it's a great way to get to know a school without wasting money. When you do decide to visit, or when you're really considering to do a visit, do the virtual visit first, so at least you get an idea of the lay of the land. For example, we do a virtual visit where our student tour guides, they're the same ones you're touring our campus. So you're doing it virtual so you can see where the admissions office is, where the parking lot is, those types of things. Book the visit with the school before you book your flights. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but most of us still have some type of COVID protocols, maybe reduced size of tours, or maybe we're only offering tours 3 days a week. So making sure you book that flight. I had a family the other day, they booked a flight, they wanted to tour on a Saturday, and we don't offer Saturday tours every Saturday. So making sure you can get those visits set up. And then read the details when you're booking those visits. Can mom and dad attend, or can it just be a student, or can you only bring one student? Or some people like to bring the whole gaggle, grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, boyfriends, girlfriends, everybody with them. So we really need to know if you can bring all those people too, or just for you. And are you doing an interview while you're on campus? Or are you going to sit in on a class? Those types of things. And then I think we all realize this, be mindful of state and local restrictions. Every city and every state's going to be a little bit different. We had a family show up in the middle of COVID and they weren't wearing masks, and they were confused on that. So making sure that you know what you're going into. And then if you're sick, stay home. Let us know. Say, hey, I don't feel well, I'm going to stay home. And we'll set you up with a virtual visit and do some stuff like that, or most schools can. Next slide, please. So now we got admitted. It's fall. Well, fall and springtime are 2 times. So next slide, one more time. And we got to start narrowing our options. So in the fall, some things you need to start doing. Finish your lists. So Ed talked about the 3, 3, and 3, the 9 schools you should be looking at, making sure you do the lists, making sure you're finishing those applications, applying for financial aid through CSS and the FAFSA, whichever your schools need, or any additional information they might need. I think y'all have a financial aid presentation coming up. And then apply for scholarships. For my university, there is no separate scholarship application. The application that you're submitting is the same exact application as the common application for your scholarships. So you'll apply, you'll get admitted, and then you'll get a scholarship. Other schools will require that maybe there's a scholarship form. So making sure you know those types of things. The other thing I know my parents used to tell me, Michael, we won't qualify for financial aid, we make too much money. Depending on the school, still fill that financial aid out, because you might not qualify for federal loan or grant, those types of things. But for example, Loyola, Maryland, I have what we call evergreen grants in there that are given specifically for students that might not be able to get federal money, but we still think they need to be on our campus. And then engage with us. Ed talked a little bit about demonstrated interest. I'm going to go in a little more detail for that. We like to talk. As you can tell, Rachel, myself, Ed, and Emily, we love to talk and visit with our students. So that's what you're going to do in the fall. Then you're going to start getting those admit packets, or those electronic admit emails that say you've been admitted to the colleges and universities. And now you're going to start getting those decisions either in late winter, early spring. You'll start getting scholarships and financial aid packages. And that's when you start to realize, all right, what is really realistic? You know, you might want to go to this school. My mom always used to laugh at me because she'd be like, Michael, you have caviar dreams and beer taste when it comes to colleges. You don't have, I mean, so you know, you need to make sure you can afford to go. Once you decide that, then start visiting campuses and start really touring and sitting in on classes and meeting with faculty, and then making sure you enroll. You know, sending that deposit in, making sure that you're signed up for orientation in your classes. Every school is going to be a little bit different on when dates and deadlines are. So I encourage you, get an Excel spreadsheet ready to go and start typing all those schools in. Sorry about that. And with next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about demonstrated interest. This is the way. Not all schools track demonstrated interest, but it's important you know about demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest makes you raise your hand, or lets the school see your hand being raised to say, hey, I'm interested. I want to have a conversation. I want to engage with you. For example, when you go to a college fair and you, next slide, please, and fill out one of those little prospect cards, or maybe you're doing it online. That's raising your hand and saying, hey, I want more information. Guess what? If I email you and you don't raise your hand or click the link, sometimes I say, tell me more about you. And you click that link, that's going to be demonstrated interest. all of a sudden I know you're really interested. Maybe I'm going to send you a brochure, or maybe I'm going to send you an invitation to a special event that we're having in California for our prospective students. So you can do demonstrated through a lot of different ways. Sometimes you call the school, sometimes inquiry cards. When you're emailing back and forth with us, we're tracking that. Physical mail, when I get a transcript in the mail from one of y'all, that is definitely us knowing that you're interested. Events, showing up to things like this for our colleges and universities. Interviews, campus tours, and then even texting back. A lot of us, our systems record those texts. This is a blessing and a curse sometimes because we're tracking everything. So if you say things like, Michael, I didn't know when the deadline was. Guess what? I can open the email, see when you open the emails I sent you and said you opened it 4 days before, 3 days before, 2 days before. Same thing with when you're writing back or texting, making sure that and polished, not texting back, hey boo, interested in your school, but hey Michael, it's so nice to talk to you. I'm definitely interested in your college and university. So that's a little bit about demonstrated interest. Don't be scared of it. It really can help you. I always will say physical mail is always great too, especially if you're doing an interview. Sending me a thank you card. That thank you card goes on a bulletin board typically by my desk. So guess what? When they say, Michael, we have one more person that we could give a scholarship to. And I'm like, I have that person that I know. I interviewed with them and I see that card. I'm pulling the card right off the bulletin board. Next slide. And I think I'm turning it over to, I forget who I'm turning this over to. I apologize.
I think it's me. Thanks, Michael. Awesome. So just kind of going on to the next few steps and mostly in review. We've talked a lot about different reasons as to why you would choose your college, how visits will help you, selectivity, looking at really all those factors. So, these are a few reasons of why students decide on their final college. And the first one I really want to hit on is reputation. Reputation is kind of a double-edged sword. So a lot of students will look up those rankings, or they automatically think, oh my God, Stanford must be the most amazing university because it's an Ivy League, or maybe it's Harvard, or whatever it is in mind. Just know reputation isn't always everything. And this whole time we've been asking yourself, what do these factors mean to you? Because to you, that university that has this reputation, whatever it may be, good or bad, or maybe somewhere in the middle, that might not be the perfect fit for you, or you might not find yourself as comfortable and as happy on those campuses. So just be careful when you look at universities that have a certain type of prestige or reputation. Know that it's not everything, and that university will have other factors that you'll need to look into as well. Campus visits. Did you enjoy your visit? Did it feel like home? Is it a place that you can see yourself going to? Scholarships and financial aid, that is an important piece of it as well. We talk about, the overall fit, but we also need to ask, what does it mean for finances? Is this going to be a good fit for you financially? So that's always a good conversation to have with your parents or your guardians and your families to see, what is a likely university that you can attend based on scholarship availability and financial aid availability. Campus safety as well, always a good question. I know my colleagues and I get that question often. What safety measures do you have on your campus? What's the safety like in that city? So always good things to keep in mind. The legacy of a university kind of goes with the reputation, keep that in mind, but also understand, what about the legacy you want to leave? Does that have to do with the future career that you want? Understand that university name will be tied to what you do as you move forward in your life after you graduate too. Alumni, do you want to be an alumni of that university? Would you be a proud alumni? Talking about your college that you went to. Major, of course, making sure that it actually has the major that you want. I've talked with students who are like, I'm so excited about this university. And I've heard great things, and I'm excited to major in architecture. And I'm like, ooh, we don't have architecture. So just be sure to do your research on those major options too, especially if you have a specific major in mind. The website, especially in a virtual environment, definitely go online, check out each university's website, do some research as well, maybe before reaching out for an admissions interview, or asking some questions. I always love it when I see that students have taken interest in St. Louis University by going to our website and really looking at our research options, our internships, our majors, and showing me in an email that they've done that research, but maybe asking a question that they couldn't find on the website. So always a good option too. Is it close to family? Is that important to you? Being close to home, or do you have family out of state that you'd be comfortable being close with? Of course, internship opportunities, and then kind of a number of other things, study abroad programs. Do you need to have a friend that attends that university, or are you comfortable going alone? The type of students in the campus culture, what kind of culture do you want? Staff, sports teams, is art and music really important to you? Student life activities. And then kind of, is it important if your aunt, uncle, grandpa, grandma, mom, dad went there, or is that not important? And then of course, the admissions materials that we send you. So all of these factors tend to, for the most part, have an effect on how students decide on their colleges. So again, these are just important questions to ask yourself as you go forward. I know we've given you a ton of information today, and it can seem overwhelming at first. And our goal for it is to not be overwhelming, but this is just how we're trying to help you narrow this down, narrow down from 3,000 colleges to maybe that 20 college list that you're like, okay, I could see myself, being here, and then narrowing that down from like the 8 to 9 colleges that you really want to apply to, and then narrowing it down from there. So it all has to start somewhere. So just keep in mind as you make your college list, ask yourself these questions on what factors are the most important to you when deciding on a college. So again, we talked about size of the university, we talked about location, majors and programs, acceptance rates, the GPAs, test required or optional. Ed talked a lot about selectivity, and that kind of target, reach, and likely schools as well. Understanding the scholarship opportunities, the costs of out-of-state tuition at maybe some out-of-state schools, or total cost of attendance. And then again, that it just feels right moment, knowing when to go visit a university, attending those virtual visits and those virtual activities that Michael was talking about. And then showing us your interest. By that demonstrated interest also helps us get to know you better as you start to really find your college options that you're hoping to apply to. So with that, that is the majority of our presentation. We do have about 10 or so minutes to answer any questions. And I did want to give Emily a chance to introduce herself since she joined late. So I'll go ahead and have Emily introduce herself real quick. She is with Loyola Chicago.
Hello, everybody. I am so sorry I was not here right on time. I got held up. And thank you to my lovely colleagues for presenting. But I'm Emily. I am a regional admission counselor based in Northern California. And I meant to present the first few slides that Rachel graciously did instead. But I am happy to be here. And I hope there are some questions maybe that I can help answer now with this extra time we have. So feel free to put those in. I think we're using the chat, Rachel. Is there a key? I think it's the chat box. So if you have anything in there, feel free to put them in there.
Yeah, we'll start with the chat just because it's a little bit easier to kind of organize questions. And we already have a really good question in the chat talking about how do you know which colleges take demonstrated interest into account and which colleges do not? Michael, I know you talked a little bit about that in your presentation. Anything to add, or does anybody else want to jump in for this question?
This one's really difficult, I think, to answer because there's no right there's no one way. There's not a big list that says, yes, they take it into consideration, or no, they don't take it into consideration. So you'll have to ask the individual schools if they take demonstrated interest typically. But one of the things that I realize is some of the schools that don't consider it in the application process, I'll share this with you. A lot of times, one of my previous universities that I worked with, we did not look at demonstrated interest. But when you emailed or when I interviewed you, I was still looking at your file or wondering where that file was, because I was like, oh, I remember interviewing that person. That was the person that came from cheer practice. So even if they're saying officially they're not looking at demonstrated interest, sometimes they are. Or when are they looking at demonstrated interest is the other question. For example, Loyola, Maryland, we don't look at it when we're looking at your application or financial aid or scholarships. But when it comes to getting students off the wait list, we say, are you interested in the wait list? If so, please click here. The students that raise their hand, those are the first people that we're looking at. They're on the wait list. So that's something to keep in mind also.
Yeah, I'll add, I think a good rule of thumb on that one is to just consider that they are, you know, tracking demonstrated interest. I think it's better to do that than try to figure out, you know, like Michael said, sometimes they're going to say no, but they're tracking it for other things. I'll give another example is we have director scholarships that are given out pretty late, you know, in the process, and that's additional funding, and that kind of just is dependent on how much scholarship money we have at the kind of the end of the cycle. And that is very much kind of, we look back at the records of how much interaction students have had, and you know, and the counselor actually makes the recommendation of whether we, you know, recommend that scholarship for the student. So we don't look at that at the time of admission, but there are other times in the process where that does come into play. So I think my recommendation on that is just pretend that every school is, you know, tracking that demonstrated interest, and do your best to reach out to schools and be professional at all times. I think that's just a good way to move forward on that one.
I'd actually, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add a quick note. Pay attention to yourself too. If you are getting these emails, and there are schools, there's private schools that our students are applying to that have departments that run algorithms about how many emails you open, whether or not you're clicking on those links. And your the decision about whether or not to admit you is based on those algorithms. And so my advice to you is, if you are receiving emails from schools that are giving you information and you're not interested in reading it, remove that school from your list, because you're not able to indicate an interest by even opening an email. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
With that also, I'll jump on Amy's comment with those emails. Also, because you're going to start getting emails from all of us, because you're going to go to a college fair and you're going to be like, I like this school, I like this school, I like this school. Then if you don't start tapping out or unsubscribing, I am totally fine. I always say it's like a relationship. Break up with me when you decide you don't like me. Don't drag me all the way along, because at the end, I want you to make sure you're having the right emails in your inbox making those decisions. So if you never unsubscribe or you never email us and say, thank you so much, I've committed to another college or university, you're going to start missing emails that you really need from the colleges and universities that you want to go to.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So we do have a couple more questions coming in, and I definitely want to have time to get to all of them. So I'll just ask this next question to one of our admissions counselors here, and then we'll just move on to the next from there. So Ed, I'll give this one to you. I got a question saying, well, if I'm interested in an admissions interview, how do I get in contact to sign up for an admissions interview?
Yeah, great question. Love the fact that you want to lean in and do that. You can go onto the school's websites, and in many cases, it's pretty easy to find your admission counselor. A lot of times we're assigned by geography. Sometimes it's tougher to find, so you might write to the general admissions and query, is there an opportunity to interview? We will do that. Most schools will do that across the country. We will do it in your backyard. And so look for those opportunities on what we might call our travel pages, places that we know when we will be in the West Coast. You might find opportunity to connect that way. If you do not find that information on a travel site, again, write to the general admissions account, or if you can find your counselor, write to them. There may be the opportunity to, again, interview with regional people like us. Sometimes colleges and universities will fly out to the West Coast for a short period of time. And so you might have a small window or opportunity to meet. We oftentimes utilize our graduates. So you might have the opportunity to do an alumni interview. There's some different preparation for that. And in many cases now we're offering the opportunity to interview via Zoom. So there usually are opportunities, and it's partly back to that question, who acknowledges or requires demonstrated interest. Not every school will afford the opportunity to interview, but many who don't have a posted statement on whether it's available or not, if you ask, they'll offer the opportunity. So it's a great question to ask the individual schools. You can sometimes, again, find it on our travel web pages, or a lot of colleges will have a part of the site that says find your counselor. Again, often it's assigned by geography. Sometimes it's by major or other things, but you will have that opportunity to find out who your counselor is. If you do go to virtual events, you can even ask that. Are you my admissions counselor? And then save that email address, save that contact information, utilize us throughout the process. Again, some of the things that demonstrated interest is about are not necessarily huge time sinks. They're taking advantage of the opportunities that we provide, reading the emails. We can track that. That's very true. But the time that you ask us questions or engage with us throughout the process, we do remember that in the decision process. So check those websites, check with your counselor. If your top college or university or one that you're applying to is visiting your high school, make sure to step in and say hello. You might have a 5-minute encounter. One of my favorite students came and told me one time during a school visit, he couldn't stick around because he was the captain of the basketball team. They were selecting the freshman class, grabbed my business card, sent me a thank you note, grabbed a packet of information, made a huge impact in about 5 minutes, squeezing that into his busy day. So there is that opportunity to engage with us throughout.
Awesome, thank you. And we just have one more quick question, and I'm going to give it to Emily. So the question is, a student says, I've emailed some of my admissions counselors at colleges I'm interested in, but I'm worried that I might be bothering them by asking too many questions. Will they ever get annoyed, or how can I find that balance as to how often to reach out to my admissions counselors?
I will definitely say there's many more times for me where I feel like students are underutilizing my expertise and me as a resource rather than overutilizing it. I have had a handful. I think we've all had students that we feel, wow, they're really writing us a lot. But even those students, it rarely has felt like bothersome, especially when they're writing professionally. I feel like one email written unprofessionally can be just as bad as, is much worse than a professionally written email sent many times with many questions. That's really what I'm here for. You might find, I think you will find that during the busy times of year, which is we're coming up on, now it starts getting busier for us, and it just gets busier for us as admission counselors until December. Our response times might slow down. So we might right now be able to answer you, in 24 hours, but next month, the month after, you might find it's taking 3, 4, 5 days. We travel a lot. We're doing a lot more in person now. So just keep that in mind. Don't expect a 24-hour response time from us. Write professional emails. And definitely, I wouldn't say worry about that you're bothering us too much. Just write those professional emails, get those questions out. And that's the important part, is that you're asking those questions. So I'd say that's very important. So I personally don't feel bothered by students' questions.
Great. Yeah, and I agree too. I would say if there's definitely questions you have, check our website first. And if you can't find the answer there, email us as well. It's always a good option. Great. Well, that is everything from us. Thank you so much for your great questions. And our contact info has been up on the screen. So please, if you have